There was a student at my school named Blake whose presence invoked a complex mix of sympathy and fear. Blake found himself caught in the crosshairs of relentless bullying, both covert and overt. While it's important to recognize that some of his actions might have justified the backlash he received, such as his proclivity for violence and frequent confrontations with teachers, it's equally crucial to consider the factors that shaped him. It seemed he had been indoctrinated into unconventional beliefs that ran counter to the school's teachings, possibly by his parents. This intricate web of influence made it challenging to place the entirety of the blame on his shoulders. Yet Blake's outward demeanor mirrored his turbulent inner world. His physical appearance and conversational style repelled many. His life teetered on the precipice of expulsion when he engaged in severe harassment of a girl who had rebuffed his advances, partly due to his offensive odor. Had this incident unfolded differently, it might have rewritten the course of events we were about to witness. One fateful day, during a seemingly routine history class, Blake disrupted the tranquility with a vehement challenge to the teacher's interpretation of Civil War events. What began as a debate spiraled into a heated altercation. The teacher, rather unyielding in his response, embarrassed Blake in front of the class. This incident marked a turning point as Blake, frustrated and humiliated, launched into an impassioned tirade about the perceived decline of the nation. Our collective response was laughter, dismissing his outburst. Unbeknownst to us, this incident sowed the seeds of a tragic event. Over the weekend that followed, Blake's Snapchat account became the repository of disturbing content. He flaunted images of himself brandishing his father's extensive gun collection, which he often boasted about. Pictures of him posing before a Nazi flag, presumably belonging to his dad, were also posted. Yet the most chilling aspect was a photograph of our history teacher, affixed to a cardboard target. The caption sent shivers down our spines. "Getting ready for school on Monday." These posts were ominous, and for years there had been rumors and jests about Blake's potential for violence. However, none of us genuinely believed he possessed the audacity to act on his dark fantasies. Several individuals reported the posts to the school authorities, but in hindsight, involving law enforcement might have been a wiser choice. On the following Monday, Blake arrived late for school, heading directly to our American history class. However, this time, the situation took a nightmarish turn. He found himself barred from entering the classroom as usual, intercepted by the school resource officer and a pair of administrators. They insisted on inspecting his backpack. In a horrifying twist of fate, Blake produced a pistol and opened fire, shooting the resource officer before fleeing the scene. The deafening gunshot reverberated through the school, and mere moments later, the lockdown protocol was activated. The realization that it was Blake who had committed this act sent a wave of dread rippling through our classroom. I watched my teacher, whose face had drained of color, his image now dominated by the bullet holes from Blake's disturbing post. In a matter of seconds, he regained his composure, instructing us on lockdown procedures, securing the door, turning off the lights, and urging us to hide. The timing could not have been more critical. We knew Blake was rapidly approaching, and we were within striking distance. I found myself frozen, unable to fathom how to protect myself, gripped by an overwhelming sense of fear. As we huddled in darkness on the school's tiled floor, about to become potential victims, my mind was paralyzed with the inevitability of our impending doom. Then, another gunshot pierced the silence. Cries gave way to screams, and panic erupted within the classroom. In that moment of crisis, I made a snap decision. I sprinted toward the window, opting to leap from the second story rather than await Blake's arrival. Other students followed suit, and in the ensuing chaos, I was jostled aside and tumbled to the floor. Glancing back, I witnessed something surreal. Blake clutching his face, blood seeping through his fingers, and the inner door handle mangled, as if he had attempted to force his way in. I remained seated in stunned disbelief, struggling to process the surreal scene amid the bedlam. Our teacher implored us to move away from the windows and resume hiding. When I eventually mustered the strength to speak, I uttered the words almost inaudibly. "I think Blake shot himself." The utterance seemed to break the spell, rendering the room silent. A friend rushed to the door, peering out the window just as Blake made his escape. Covered in blood, I stood beside him. Amidst the newfound quietude, we could hear Blake's anguished cries echoing through the hallway. Against all reason, I attempted to open the door, only to discover that it was shattered beyond repair. We were trapped within the classroom, but at least Blake was no longer a threat. Hours later, we were finally liberated, and slowly but surely, we pieced together the events that had unfolded. Blake had endeavored to shoot the door handle, but instead, he had obliterated the lock, causing shards of metal to explode into his face, resulting in permanent blindness in one eye. This twist of fortune marked the abrupt end to his rampage and dispelled the misguided belief that a lock could be miraculously opened by gunfire. Blake surrendered and was tried as an adult, facing a prison term of at least 20 years. Fortunately, the resource officer he had shot managed to recover without enduring severe, lasting health consequences. My high school was situated in close proximity to an area infamous for its rampant gang violence, a fact that made lockdowns an unfortunately common occurrence. However, when I reflect on my time there, one particular incident remains etched vividly in my memory. Oddly enough, this event had nothing to do with the typical causes of concern, such as fugitives on the loose or firearm-related incidents. Instead, it was a singular moment that sent shivers down my spine, and it was all due to a fellow student whom everyone recognized as a troublemaker. A young man by the name of Jason. Jason was one of those enigmatic individuals who possessed an extraordinary intellect but struggled immensely with authority, socialization, and various personal issues. Every school, it seems, harbors at least one such character. His track record included a suspension for bringing a knife to school, and astoundingly, an expulsion in the same year for attempting to strangle a teacher using nothing more than a shoelace. Despite these troubling episodes, he made a return the following academic year after spending several months in an intervention school. Sadly, his return seemed to have exacerbated rather than mitigated his issues. My encounter with Jason occurred when we both found ourselves in the front office on the same day, each of us having run afoul of the school's rules for different reasons. We awaited individual meetings with the assistant principal, but it appeared to be an exceptionally busy day for her. Consequently, Jason and I found ourselves in an unusual situation, sitting together in the front office. In those fleeting moments, Jason regaled me with tales of his experiences at the intervention school, sharing anecdotes about the colorful characters he had encountered, pyromaniacs, drug dealers, and even members of street gangs. These individuals had an undoubtedly negative influence on him, yet strangely, he spoke highly of his time there, even claiming to have forged genuine friendships with them. I found myself oddly captivated by his stories of the misadventures he had embarked upon with these newfound acquaintances. However, the mood took a stark turn when Jason casually dropped a disconcerting piece of information into our conversation. He had learned how to make a bomb during his stint at the intervention school. Before I could react or seek clarification, the assistant principal emerged from her office and summoned Jason inside. That brief conversation would turn out to be the last, and indeed, the only interaction I ever had with him. The encounter left me with a strange impression, as despite the foreboding reputation that preceded him, Jason appeared surprisingly cheerful on that day, even though he faced disciplinary action. I held on to a glimmer of hope that perhaps he might undergo a transformation for the better, but hindsight has taught me that his happiness was inextricably linked to his association with individuals of a violent disposition and his disturbing thoughts about causing harm to others. Approximately 3 weeks into the school year, a shocking event unfolded. Seemingly out of the blue, Jason instigated a bomb threat during our second period class. Although authorities swiftly apprehended him, he adamantly refused to disclose the location of the alleged bomb, prompting the school's immediate evacuation. I distinctly recall the nauseating sensation in the pit of my stomach when I laid eyes on Jason's clear backpack leaning against a hallway wall, conspicuously bulging with a garbage bag. My instincts kicked in, and I promptly alerted an administrator, who urgently reported the situation. It was a heart-pounding relief that the bag did not detonate while students were exiting the building, crammed together like sardines. We spent what felt like an eternity outside, in a state of lockdown, enduring the scorching heat of the sun, anxiously awaiting the arrival of the bomb squad. As the hours dragged on, my emotions oscillated between fear, irritation, boredom, and restlessness. To pass the time, I began jesting and horsing around with the individuals seated nearby, pretending to succumb to a heat stroke. Yet, nobody took my antics seriously. In a playful moment, I even stretched out across their feet, eliciting laughter and light-hearted kicks. Little did we know that this brief interlude of levity would lead to a shocking revelation. While lying there, my eyes were drawn to an alarming sight. Something was taped to the underside of the bleacher's seat right in front of my face. Intrigued, I maneuvered the legs of the person next to me, attempting to get a closer look. To our collective astonishment, there it was, a bomb. Encased within a box meticulously wrapped in duct tape, the package bore a note that sent chills down our spines, bearing the ominous message, "This is the real one, I swear." Panic consumed me, and I instinctively leaped from the bleachers, injuring my ankle in the process and inciting chaos as students scattered in all directions, devoid of a safe haven. A few freshmen ended up trampled, nursing broken bones, while others scaled the fences and fled into nearby shops. Many seized the opportunity to run all the way home. When the panic finally subsided, the school resembled a ghost town. The most disconcerting aspect of this harrowing experience lies in the revelation that none of the bombs were real. Jason had orchestrated an elaborate and malevolent hoax. Undoubtedly, his intellect and capabilities were more than sufficient to construct real explosive devices capable of inflicting serious harm. However, his motivation was not to spend years behind bars, but rather to find himself in juvenile detention or another intervention school. The fear, panic, and wasted hours were all part of a cruel and twisted joke he played on us. What continues to haunt me to this day is the chilling awareness that if Jason had opted to carry out his dark intentions, the consequences would have been catastrophic. Lives, including mine, would have been irrevocably altered. Jason exposed a glaring vulnerability in the school's security and response protocols. It's unsettling to think of what might have transpired had those bombs been genuine. The whereabouts of Jason remain a mystery to me, but my fervent hope is that he remains distant from my life for the remainder of my days. I call Oklahoma my home, and it's situated right in the heart of Tornado Alley. For generations, the rhythm of our school life has been punctuated by the regular cadence of extreme weather drills. These drills were an integral part of our education long before the addition of other emergency exercises. My middle school years trace back to the 1990s, and during that era, I can vividly recall those moments when our youthful selves would gather and huddle on the cold, linoleum-covered floors of the interior hallways within our school, with the harsh fluorescent lights switched off, plunging us into darkness. As a young girl, it was a sensation that always felt somewhat awkward, like I was unintentionally exposing myself to the passing gaze of teachers and staff. Yet, regardless of personal discomfort, strict adherence to the drill's protocol was expected. My vocal protests fell on deaf ears, and I, along with my peers, found ourselves in this peculiar and, at times, humiliating position at least once a month for years. Strangely, as I reflect upon those memories, I realize that I grew to dread these extreme weather lockdowns more than the very notion of a deadly tornado itself. Tornadoes, after all, were exceedingly rare, making an appearance perhaps once in a blue moon. However, my monthly moon performance in those hallways became an unwelcome ritual. The reality, though, was more severe than monthly drills could convey. Lockdowns, it turned out, occurred more frequently than we could have ever anticipated because genuine extreme weather situations were, and still are, all too common during certain seasons of the year. One particular day, etched into my memory from my 7th grade year in May, proved to be a turning point. At the time, my classroom was housed in one of those temporary structures they referred to as portables. These portables, despite their misleading name, were far from mobile and were instead flimsy, prefabricated structures designed to address the ever-present issue of overcrowding. The protocol for anyone caught in a portable during a weather emergency was clear-cut. Evacuate immediately and seek shelter in the main building of the school, leaving all belongings behind, including our backpacks. Once inside, we'd all crouch down on the ground, shielding our heads with our hands, assuming the most uncomfortable, awkward, and frankly questionable positions for a duration that seemed to stretch far beyond the norm during our practice drills. Our teachers, on that fateful day, shared with us the unsettling news of an extreme cyclonic thunderstorm with a high probability of producing tornadoes heading directly in our direction. Back then, those meteorological terms were jargon I couldn't quite comprehend, but time has taught me to take them very seriously. Usually, these lockdowns felt excessive, almost theatrical, and unnecessary. However, the atmosphere that day was different. As the winds outside grew fiercer, echoing the eerie tone of a Halloween night, and the tornado sirens wailed persistently, a palpable sense of dread descended upon us. In the initial moments, there was an odd blend of morbid anticipation and excitement. I was somewhat thrilled at the prospect of experiencing a genuine storm without the worry of my home being torn apart. I didn't particularly care if the school suffered damage. As long as I remained unharmed, it was of little consequence. There was even a part of me that secretly wished for a tornado, believing it would somehow validate the awkward moon performances. However, that fleeting hope dissipated rapidly. The classroom grew progressively darker as the natural light from outside was swallowed by an unnatural, ominous darkness. The howling winds outside intensified, shaking the very foundations of our flimsy structure. Hail pelted the door with ferocity, reminiscent of a relentless meteor shower. In no time, the once serene hallway had transformed into a cacophonous battlefield, and fear gripped everyone within its grasp. Then, the telltale sound of a tornado began to whisper into our ears, a low, menacing grumble that grew into a deafening roar, akin to a freight train barreling toward us. It became undeniable, even to those who couldn't see it, that a tornado was lurking dangerously close, and with each passing second, the likelihood of a direct hit became more apparent. Many of my fellow students began to cry, and even our teachers, while attempting to maintain an air of authority, couldn't entirely mask the fear in their voices. When the walls themselves began to tremble, they too sought shelter, and for a few agonizing minutes, we were all united in this vulnerable, crouched position, one that had been designed to protect us. In that moment, the fear of anyone peeking at the awkwardness of our contorted forms was overshadowed by far more pressing concerns. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the resonance of an approaching tornado, a sensation that reverberated within my chest. Outside, I could hear the chaos and destruction unfolding, with debris slamming against the doors only to be hurled off into the distance. Then, the world seemed to be fed into a wood chipper. The most harrowing moment arrived when the windows, no longer able to withstand the onslaught, shattered. A torrent of wind rushed into the hallway, and the storm had finally found its way inside. There was no escape now. It felt inevitable that the entire school would be wrenched from its foundation, with all of us aboard, launched into the skies. I clamped my teeth together and prayed fervently, as I am sure we all did. Miraculously, by some divine grace, our prayers were answered. Just as it seemed the tornado was on the cusp of descending upon us, it began to subside. At last, we could collectively exhale a sigh of relief. Over the next few minutes, all the ominous signs that had heralded the tornado's approach gradually reversed themselves. The sun emerged once more, and the air grew calm. After waiting a few more minutes to ensure it was safe, the lockdown was finally lifted, and we could uncoil ourselves from our cramped positions. My legs and back ached, but I was unscathed. The school still stood, but the portables told a different story. As I ventured outside, walking toward the field of portables, I bore witness to the true extent of the devastation. They had been obliterated, reduced to a heap of rubble and twisted metal. Everything I had cherished in my backpack, a scrapbook filled with memories, notebooks brimming with lessons, and a diary holding my deepest thoughts, vanished without a trace. Knowing that had I remained in my classroom during the tornado, I would have been utterly destroyed left an indelible sensation in my chest, a feeling that time will never erase. It is challenging to convey the emotions that wash over you when you realize that you came perilously close to the brink of death at such a young age. Since that day, I have never taken the threat of severe weather lightly. Living in Tornado Alley, it has become an inseparable part of my existence. Oklahoma is where I was born and raised, and it is where I will continue to call home.